Today we'll be continuing our study of Titus 2, 4, and 5's instruction that we love our children, this time with regard to some medical procedures which are often pushed upon newborn babies. Hello, and welcome to Wisdom for Women, where we study the Word of God and the words of God, applying them practically to our daily lives, our habits, our decisions, our personalities, our work, our play, and our relationships. This is a gender-specific channel for women. 1 Timothy 2:12 says, "But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence." At the same time, I'm commanded as an aged woman to teach the young women. In light of that, let me make it clear that if you are a man viewing this episode, you should know that my teaching is not directed toward you. Today and every day, I'll be reading from the centuries-old Authorized King James Bible, the perfectly preserved English translation of the very words of God, and we will together study to show ourselves approved, workwomen who need not be ashamed, as we rightly divide the word of truth. Let's review our scripture, Titus 2, 4, and 5, that they, the aged women, may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. We're on the topic of loving our children, and in today's episode, we're going to dive into caring for our newborns, specifically with regard to circumcision and vaccination. If you've watched much of my channel, you probably can guess my opinion already on these two medical interventions into the life of our tiny infants, but I would like in this episode to clarify and educate as to why I believe what I believe. Note that in this episode, I will be referring in a modest way to male anatomy, as well as showing a drawing of certain features of that anatomy, so please use your God-given discretion as to when, where, and with whom you tune in. Let's start with modern medicine's routine practice of circumcision for all boys, often pushed on the new parents of a son as soon as he is born, before they even leave the hospital. Over 80% of boys are circumcised in America, and 99% of those are circumcised immediately after birth, even though circumcision in this critical neonatal period is scientifically contraindicated. Today's circumcision of a baby boy is worlds apart from the circumcision that evidenced God's covenant with Israel in the Old Testament, and this is important to understand before we get into this topic. Genesis 17:23-27 gives us the first instance of circumcision in the Bible. Let's read that together. "And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin, in the selfsame day as God had said unto him. And Abraham was 90 years old and 9 when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son. And all the men of his house, born in the house and bought with the money of the stranger, were circumcised with him." Notice that Abraham and Ishmael were circumcised in the flesh of their foreskin. The foreskin is literally the skin before, or the skin in front of, rather than its common modern interpretation as the skin around. The Bible never mentions laying bare the glands of the male organ, which is routinely practiced today. I'm going to read from an extremely important book called Biblical Circumcision versus Modern Circumcision by Todd Ellison. I will link this book in the description below, and I highly recommend reading it if you are going to have any sons and want to circumcise them. Though I disagree with Ellison on his Hebrew roots theology, he has important information regarding circumcision. Here we are on page 6. Modern circumcision is not what the Bible prescribed. Regardless of how a man's religious persuasion informs him concerning this topic, circumcision as done today is a radical departure from the biblical practice. Here now is the main issue we want to present in this book. We will lay out the distinction between biblical circumcision, the Hebrew word for it is Milah, to cut, and the radical Periah, laying bare the glands, circumcision, that has been the norm among Jewish and Christianized societies for many hundreds of years. Our contention is that it was quite different. Our objective in revealing the disparity is to enable the reader to make a more informed decision regarding the degree of circumcision for himself and or for his son. Norm Willis explains simply that modern medical circumcision removes the entire foreskin. He notes that an infant can heal from this procedure fairly quickly, but it would be a painful thing for grown adults and elderly men to endure, and it would take a long time to heal. The Almighty's command to Abraham was only to circumcise himself in his foreskin. meaning that the foreskin would remain, but would be ringed by a circular cut, which would heal relatively quickly. James E. Perrin explains in greater detail how circumcision was done initially by Abraham and his descendants. The original biblical circumcision of Abraham's time was a relatively minor ritual circumcision procedure in which only the redundant end of the foreskin extending beyond the tip of the glans, the soft, bulbous tip of the male organ inside the foreskin, was removed. This was called Milah. It is from this term that the Jewish religious covenant circumcision ritual Bris Milah or Brith Milah got its name. Following Milah, an organ so circumcised would still contain a considerable portion of the foreskin, and the organ would have continued to go through its natural development, since most of the foreskin would remain intact. Protection of the glands would still have occurred. The foreskin would not be stripped back off the glands and would naturally separate from the glands gradually as the child matures, much as it would had the child not been circumcised. The sensitive frenulum, Latin for little bowstring, a small strip of skin that joins the foreskin to the glands, would not have been disturbed or moved, and the foreskin remaining would continue to cover and protect a substantial portion of the glands, especially when flaccid, and the glands would appear as uncircumcised. There would be a minimal loss of sensitivity or intended protection. The author of the Covenant Circumcision website, who advocates the biblical form of circumcision, declares that from the day when Abraham did it himself at age 99 and his son Ishmael at age 13, as described in Genesis 17:24 and 25, until about the year 140 AD, only the part of the foreskin that protrudes out from the male organ was removed. Based on scripture and the historical evidence, foreskin in the Hebrew vernacular means only what is described as overhang in this rendering, the skin at the fore end of the male organ. Looking at this drawing, you can see how much of the foreskin would have been removed in the bris milah, only the very end, only the skin to the fore of the boy's member. It would be the equivalent of snipping off the very end of the nipple on a baby bottle. In Exodus 4:25, we read about Moses' wife Zipporah, who quickly circumcises their son Gershom when the Lord is about to kill him. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet. A sharp stone would have been sufficient for a bris milah circumcision done hastily and in fear. A bris milah circumcision would have been something that Abraham, at 99 years old, could have lived through without infection or months-long recovery, the rough equivalent, blood loss-wise, of clipping off a skin tag or a mole. And this bris milah was practiced for over 1,800 years. This is the circumcision that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, his 12 sons, David, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and all of the Israelites down to Jesus and Paul would have undergone. It was only altered in AD 140, after the entire New Testament had been written. In AD 140, the priests began what is now today's radical circumcision. No longer the bris milah, or cut in the foreskin, but the complete removal of both foreskin and frenulum, the mutilating bris Periah. Back to Ellison's book, page 8 and following. Circumcision, as was routinely done in much of the Western world in recent centuries, on the other hand, is technically described as the surgical removal of the skin that normally covers and protects the head or glands of the male organ. At birth, this is covered with a continuous layer of skin, extending from the pubis to the tip of the organ, where the foreskin prepuce folds inward upon itself, creating a double protection layer of skin over the glands. The inner lining of the prepuce is mucous membrane and serves to keep the surface of the glands, also mucous membrane, soft, moist, and sensitive. Today's method, the bris Periah, or laying bare the glands, is overly radical. As a 1978 medical guide to patient care tragically explained with step-by-step diagrams, medical circumcision of infants generally entails breaking adhesions of the prepuce to the organ so that the entire foreskin can be retracted completely and removed. The American Academy of Pediatrics stated that an infant's foreskin is almost always attached to the glands. Clearly, this modern method of circumcision is radical and painful. Reading from page 92 of Janice Barcelo's Birth Trauma and the Dark Side of Modern Medicine, we have a description of the bris Periah circumcision procedure articulated in 1966 by John M. Foley, MD. The circumcision of a newborn boy is a spectacle so appalling and revolting in its cruelty that on their first encounter with the ordeal, many robust medical students faint. The infant is tied down securely to a circumcision board with his genitals exposed. Next, the entire foreskin and much of the penile skin is pulled through a clamp, and as the clamp screw is tightened, the skin is crushed off. As much as 80% of the total penile skin is removed. In this country, anesthetics are rarely used. The infant struggles and screams, and often vomits and defecates before lapsing into unconsciousness. Modern Bris circumcision is horrifically painful and traumatizing to a tiny baby, and can cause infection, damage to the sensitive tissues of the male organ, necrosis, and even death. The highly sensitive frenulum is simply ripped away from the glands by the circumcising doctor or mohel. Reading on in Biblical Circumcision versus Modern Circumcision, Ellison states, Foregen, a nonprofit organization founded to research and implement regenerative medical therapies for circumcised males, states the following facts. The foreskin is not an optional extra for a man's body, nor an accident. It is an integral, functioning, important component of a man's organ. An eye does not function properly without an eyelid, nor does the male organ without its foreskin. Among other things, the foreskin provides protection. The foreskin fully covers the glands, the head of the flaccid organ, thereby protecting it from damage and harsh rubbing against abrasive agents and maintaining its sensitivity. Sexual sensitivity. The foreskin provides direct sexual pleasure in its own right, as it contains the highest concentration of nerve endings on the organ. Lubrication. The foreskin, with its unique mucous membrane, permanently lubricates the glands, thus improving sensitivity and aiding smoother intercourse. Skin gliding during erection. The foreskin facilitates the gliding movement of the skin of the organ up and down the penile shaft and over the glands during erection and sexual activity. Varied sexual sensation. The foreskin facilitates direct stimulation of the glands during sexual activity by its interactive contact with the sensitive glands. And immunological defense. The foreskin helps clean and protect the glands via the secretion of antibacterial agents. My sisters and daughters, I need to tell you that this Periah mutilation of baby boys is also big business for your doctor or hospital. According to AlloHealth's 2025 article, Do Hospitals Sell Foreskins? The Truth Behind the Controversy, quote, hospitals themselves might not directly list foreskin as an item for sale, but hospitals partner with biotech companies who buy the tissue, process it, and then sell it for big bucks. A single foreskin can be worth thousands to millions of dollars once it's turned into medical grade materials or used in products. For example, some Australian suppliers sell foreskin cells for $427 per milliliter. Some reports estimate the retail value of one baby's foreskin after being processed can reach up to $190 million across different applications. That's right. What's considered trash after a circumcision can actually be biotech treasure. Foreskins of baby boys are routinely used in celebrity skincare routines. Well-known actresses such as Cate Blanchett and Sandra Bullock have praised their foreskin facials as the reason for their youthful glowing skin. Can you imagine how perverted and psychopathic such women have to be in order to put such a thing on their faces, much less brag about such a thing? And yet foreskin cells are the active ingredient in all over-the-counter EGF, epidermal growth factor face products, including Neocutis and Skin Medica creams and serums. I want to encourage you, mothers of boys, to either leave them intact as God created them, uncircumcised, or if you feel you must circumcise, to perform a non-invasive, safe Bris Milah on your baby at home. I will link instructions for such a low-key operation in the description below, if that's the route you choose. I personally know of several families who have, for reasons of their own, chosen to circumcise using a Bris Milah, and the entire event takes only a few moments, results in a minuscule amount of blood loss, and heals very quickly. The child does not go into shock or other trauma responses as regularly happens in clinical, medical, and modern mohel circumcisions. And I want to remind all of you who are Gentiles of the Apostle Paul's words on the subject. But as God hath distributed to every man, as the Lord hath called every one, so let him walk. And so ordain I in all churches. Is any man called being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Is any called in uncircumcision? Let him not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of God. Let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. And in Galatians 5:1-6, he says, Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Behold, I, Paul, say unto you that if ye be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised that he is a debtor to do the whole law. Christ is become of no effect unto you. Whosoever of you are justified by the law, ye are fallen from grace. For we through the Spirit wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. For in Jesus Christ neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love. Our next subject for discussion today is vaccination. There is no way I could do justice to this extensive topic in just this study today, so I'll put some informative links on vaccination in the description below, and I urge you to study for yourself as well. In cursory preparation for this episode, I looked up all the CDC vaccination recommendations on their site for children from birth to age 19. I counted 55 shots to supposedly protect against everything from polio to chickenpox to COVID-19 to hepatitis A and B, germ measles, respiratory illness, and more. Others have told me that their doctors recommend up to 76 vaccinations for babies and children. 76. Some of these vaccinations are given at birth in doses no newborn or preemie should be subject to. This includes the offensive administration of the hepatitis B shot. Hepatitis B is a sexually transmitted disease that can also be passed via infected drug needles. I would encourage you to ask yourself the question, why would my newborn baby need protection against a disease that is only transmitted through sexual contact or shared infected needles and syringes? Is your newborn baby going to be participating in sexual activity? Is your tiny baby going to be shooting up with street drugs? Honestly, the push for this vaccine for infants is scary, and it should deeply concern you, my sisters and daughters in the Lord. Vaccines have notably been linked to autism and Asperger's syndromes, as well as causing seizures, convulsions, chronic bloody and painful diarrhea, chronic sinus congestion, horrible diaper rash, the eyes rolling back into the head, paranoia, night waking, hypersensitivity to everything, projectile vomiting, failure to thrive, stiffness and the arching of the back with screaming in pain, and regression of age-appropriate abilities. And it's no wonder vaccines can have such a horrible effect upon children. When we look at what's in them, we can see that when we vaccinate, we are injecting poison into our children's veins. I'm going to read from and recommend that you read Shannon Rowan's book, Shots Fired, Vaccine Weapons, Medical Tyranny, and the War Against Humanity. If you remember from our first series on sobriety, I repeatedly referenced Rowan's The Red Shoes, our devil's dance with technology and how we can stop it. Shots Fired, like The Red Shoes, is an exhaustive volume, 796 pages of small print, but it is loaded with information and research about not just the COVID shot, but all vaccinations, their questionable history and connections, and strategies for healing. In Chapter 3, From Poisoned Arrows to Poisoned Needles, we read the following list of commonly found vaccine ingredients and their effects. These include, but are not limited to, aluminum, which is a xenoestrogen and neurotoxin, which impairs kidney function. Thimerosal, an organic mercury compound, which is a neurodevelopmental poison linked to autism, central nervous system damage, kidney damage, member loss, reduced IQ, and digestive disorders. MSG, an excitotoxin which has an adverse effect upon the digestive system. Phenoxyethanol, used in antifreeze and tranquilizers, which damages the central nervous system. Glutaraldehyde, which can induce genetic mutations and chromosomal changes, which will be passed on to the next generation. Glutaraldehyde also can cause damage or death to living cells. Polysorbate 80, which also induces mutations, impairs fertility, crosses the blood-brain barrier, causes anaphylaxis, kidney damage, liver damage, cancer, and causes seizures. Formaldehyde or formalin, which is a direct-acting genotoxic, damaging genetic material. Sodium borax, which damages the central nervous system, acts as a depressant, is a mutagen, and causes sterility. Are you seeing a pattern of the devil's hatred of the woman's seed in this? Refined peanut oil, which causes anaphylaxis in those who have peanut allergies. Squalene oil, which impairs fertility. Many antibiotics, which have a long list of known adverse events, including muscle weakness, neuropathy, and more. Arlazole A, a known neurotoxin. Yeast protein, a potent allergen. Disodium phosphate, a pesticide. And phenol, another central nervous system damager. Rowan includes personal testimony from Stephanie Messenger in this chapter. I'm going to read Stephanie's heartrending story, starting on page 150 and following. This is my journey. I can't say I believed in vaccination. I knew nothing about it, but had it done anyway. It's what you do, right? You do what doctors and baby health clinics tell you, and what your parents and the media advise you to do. Well, I did it, without so much as a question or thought into it. Within moments of my son receiving his immunizations, he was screaming. This continued for most of the day, and when he wasn't screaming, he was crying. This was unusual, and he was a very happy, placid baby who was already rolling over at 8 weeks and gooing and gabbing at the first sight of his mother. The doctor told me his reactions were normal and he'd be okay in a couple of days. After the first day, he had almost recovered, with only some irritability and restlessness noticeable. As the weeks passed, he continued to reach milestones, and all appeared okay. At 4 months of age, I dutifully took him in for his next round of vaccinations. This time, he screamed louder, and I could not console him at all. I would breastfeed him, only to have him projectile vomit it back up, and still the screaming continued. He had never before vomited at all, ever. After he had vomited 2 feeds, I called the doctor and told her what was happening, and she said to stop breastfeeding and give him juice only. He kept some of it down, but still vomited often. The next day I called the doctor and told her, I think the vaccines have done this. And she told me, no, it's just a coincidence, but to bring him back in, which I did. She referred me to a specialist. While waiting for the specialist appointment in a few days, my baby boy started doing strange things. He started arching his back and crying out in pain. He was as stiff as a board. His eyes would roll into the back of his head. He didn't have a temperature. He had also started shuddering, but he wasn't cold. I later learned from the doctor these were convulsions and seizures. The vomiting continued, and I was convinced to give up breastfeeding by the clinic sister. He vomited up the formula also. I was getting very scared. We went to the specialist appointment, and he took some blood for tests, and then we had to wait. His symptoms continued, and after several days, word came from the specialist that the test showed he was allergic to wheat. I stopped giving him the cereal I had started him on weeks before, but none of the symptoms went away. When I thought about it later, it was actually rice cereal anyway. I decided to move to a large city to get more help. Once I saw a doctor there, he was immediately admitted to the hospital for a battery of tests, many which were conducted under anesthetic, which of course required my signature to say, I have been notified that my baby could die while under. I had not been advised of this, but I signed it, not knowing all of the medical jargon, as I needed to get my baby well again and trusted they knew what they were doing. I want to stop here and encourage you, sisters and daughters, if you have not seen my labor and birth video, watch that because it talks a lot about these consent forms. By this time, my dear little son had lost a lot of weight, and nothing I was doing under advice from doctors and baby health clinics was working. After months of tests in the hospital, he stayed there, we were summoned into an office to be told that they didn't know why my baby was deteriorating, but they estimate he'll pass away within a couple of months. I remember thinking at the time that all this happened twice, straight after his vaccinations, but I said nothing, as I still had trust in the doctors. My mother was with me, and she said to the medical staff, I can't believe you've been using this baby as a guinea pig for months, and you've come up with nothing. The 2 older doctors left the room, and the younger ones took over. They had a different spin on it all. They said they thought it could be a condition called Alexander's disease. They said it was genetic. They went on to explain why I should never have any more children, as they could all be afflicted with this condition. My sister-in-law was working for a doctor, so I asked her to look up Alexander's disease. She gave me 3 pages of information which listed the symptoms. My little one had 2 of the listed symptoms, projectile vomiting and seizures. I came to learn many conditions have these 2 symptoms. Soon after, I took my baby home to die. It was an interesting time. You don't notice things have changed that much when you're with someone every day. I would go shopping, and people would not look at my baby, but rather look the other way. I remember going to the butcher and ordering what I wanted. The butcher refused to take my money as his eyes were transfixed on my son. I didn't understand any of this. Just people behaving strangely, I thought. I didn't realize how sick he looked, much like the starving babies on TV we are now used to seeing in African countries. My dear little boy was no longer rolling over, gooing, or gabbing. In fact, he was not doing anything anymore. He was now over 1 year of age and had not progressed past 4 months of age when he had had his last immunizations. He had, in fact, regressed to a newborn state, although now he was the length of a toddler. I carried him around in a sling, close to my heart, and waited for the day he would leave me forever. When blood started coming from his mouth and I was not getting much sleep at all so I could watch over him, he was admitted to the hospital again. He passed away a few weeks later. Vaccination killed him, I have no doubt. If he crawled under the sink and drank the same poisonous concoction of heavy metals, formaldehyde, foreign proteins, multiple viruses, and a host of other toxins, the emergency room would have called it poisoning. Because it was injected into his body, it's called a coincidence. Funny about that. I have since met many parents with similar stories. My dear aunt, who worked in the pediatric ward at a major hospital, told me outright that she has seen many babies in the wards who looked just like my baby, and the one thing they all had in common was that they were vaccinated. She went on to say, it never goes on the charts as vaccine damage, but she discusses the timing with the parents to confirm this. A few years passed, and I went on to have another child. This time I was not going to be complacent. I had over the years researched the vaccination issue at length. I read the product inserts and found the reactions all printed there. So my suspicions were confirmed by the drug company, the maker of the product, even if not by the doctors. I had been lied to, and my concerns about his immunizations were never followed up in any way. My concerns were met with denials, and due to my blind faith in the medical profession, I didn't question. Stephanie concludes thus. I have since gone on to read hundreds of books, some written by very courageous doctors who had bothered to investigate this issue thoroughly, read medical journals, and also watched some DVDs done by doctors, all to warn parents about the dangers of vaccination. I have 3 healthy, totally unvaccinated children who have never had a childhood disease, unlike their vaccinated friends who have often succumbed to these diseases that they have been vaccinated against. I kept these children fit and well using what is provided by nature, natural foods, clean water, sunshine, clean air, exercise, adequate sleep, and a loving and nurturing environment. From the moment of conception, my sisters and daughters, we mothers are in a war for the minds, the souls, and the bodies of our children. The devil harbors ill will, hatred, enmity against the woman's seed, unfriendly disposition, malevolence, a state of opposition against our seed. The children he views as his enemy. We know from Ephesians 6:12 that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So we realize that this war in which we fight is a spiritual war. But the spiritual agenda of our enemy, the devil, shows up early on in our baby's physical world. And it is up to us, the mothers, to navigate the devil's dangerous minefields on behalf of our helpless little ones who are unable to navigate those minefields on their own. Just as you, my believing sister, are the first messenger of God in your child's life, so Satan has earthly agents, his messengers, his seed, who are eager to steal, to kill, and to destroy your seed however he can. Do not underestimate or minimize your task as a mother, my sisters and daughters, and do not underestimate your enemy. Take the words of Jesus Christ to heart as you begin your journey of motherhood. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We have seen in the past several episodes that this world's medical system is designed to undermine and weaken the family, to remove pregnancy, labor, birth, and breastfeeding from a woman's natural biological sphere to a dangerous clinical doctor-managed treatment. We have seen that modern medicine is a course of this world that operates according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. Circumcision and vaccination are both under this same medical system, and they both answer directly to that spirit, which is Satan. He is the thief who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and he will try to steal, kill, and destroy your seed, which he hates, by whatever means he can, whether that is through prenatal ultrasound, violent forceps delivery, Pitocin or Cytotec-induced brain trauma, the elimination of the normal birth and breastfeeding relationship, radical mutilating circumcision, or poisonous vaccination. Our job as mothers, according to our Titus 2, 4, and 5 passage, is to love our children. It is we who are the keepers at home. It is we who guard the gate against harmful medical interventions and dangers orchestrated by the devil. Pray, my sisters and daughters, that your husband will stand with you in these decisions. Some of you may be married to men who still believe, as Stephanie Messenger once did, that the medical system is to be trusted. If your husband is one of these who, in spite of your efforts to educate him, still insists that you circumcise and vaccinate your children, then you must follow his lead. But pray, pray, pray that God will honor your obedience to your husband by preserving your helpless little ones and guarding them against the destruction of the devil at this crucial, vulnerable time in their lives. For all of us, let's try to step away from the corrupt system of this world in our care for our children, and let's give our children their best shot possible by offering, as Stephanie Messenger stated, wholesome and nutritious natural food, clean water, sunshine, clean air, exercise, adequate sleep, and a loving and nurturing environment. Let's raise our children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Join me next time, my sisters and daughters, as we discuss loving our children by training in early childhood.